Welcome back to the Introvert Wine Podcast. This is still Xenia, and I welcome you to this month's episode, which will be focused on Rioja, one of the most beautiful, one of my favorite regions in the wine world. But before we immerse ourselves into the beautiful world of Rioja, let's share some updates and the news of the past month. One of the happy news I'd like to share is that today we've seen the results of Chances Robinson's wine writing competition, and there have been some remarkable entries, and I really enjoyed and had lots of fun reading all those odes to different grape varieties. But I'm really, really happy and really proud that the Reader's Choice Award goes to Marina Rivkova from Ukraine on her ode to Odessa Black. If you haven't read it yet, it's the free article. Go explore. There are a number of really, really fantastic entries on different grape varieties, not only Ukrainian ones. I myself did an entry on Deltekoruk. There's a different one on Deltekoruk, and there are a bunch of grape varieties that are really inspiring in forms of poems, in forms of just text, and it's really been fun just rereading and coming back to different grapes that probably you'd like to retaste and come back to. On a different note, I just came back from Malaysia, where ASI co-hosted the contest of Best Sommelier of Asia Pacific with the Sommelier Association of Malaysia. Shout out to the guys that hosted us. That's an incredible organization. Asia is mind-blowing in terms of hospitality. They really outdid themselves. I do not know how to compare the future competitions to this one's. And obviously, shout out to all the candidates who have shown an amazing level of sommelier in Asia Pacific. I am really impressed. Obviously, all my congratulations to the semi-finalists and finalists. I'm really happy, and I feel it's super important for the region to have female sommeliers being more present, more than ever, competing on the highest level. We've had 5 out of 14 total candidates, female sommeliers, and in the semifinals we had 3 out of 7. And for the very first time, we had a female candidate competing in the finals in Asia, and that was Ying Yong from Malaysia. I hope her home walls did not put too much pressure on herself and were more of a support and encouragement. I know she received a lot of love and she truly deserves it. And obviously all my deepest congratulations go to Reese, who's been crowned Best Sommelier of Asia Pacific this year. If you have met him, if you know him, you know he is the most hardworking, humble, truly admirable human being. I'm really happy that he has finally achieved this level of appreciation, of acknowledgement, because he truly is one of the most deserving people out there, and I wish him best of luck in whatever he sees next for himself. But I would lie if I will not mention that Radmir Akhmetov placing third on the podium representing Kazakhstan has had a special place in my heart because that's a huge milestone for Kazakhstan as well. I hope it puts it on the wine map, and it also pushes the wine culture inside the country and gives a lot of hope and aspiration to the local sommelier community, seeing what is possible, what is achievable. And I really applaud Radmir for his dedication. I've competed with him, I've worked with him, and I know he is also one of the toughest guys out there, always seeking excellence. And I also wish him all the best. I know he'll do great in whatever next challenge he chooses for himself. Also, on the recent news, on the 12th of September, all my fellow Master Wine students have received their results of either sitting stage 1 assessment or stage 2 exam. And I really applaud all of us, all of you guys, having the courage and the nuts to sit at these examinations because they are really demanding. And for those who have passed, I am truly speechless of you're not human. I don't understand how you do it. All the best in the next stages. I am rooting for you. Anything you need, I'm here for you. I myself did not pass stage 1. I was asked to reseat, and I would love to take a couple of weeks. Luckily, I do have exactly a couple of weeks to think about what is next, whether I do really want to reseat or whether it was a nice show for me, but it's over. But nevertheless, that's gonna come later. But thank you all for your nice messages, the ones that I've received and are yet to come. all the support means a lot to me. Thank you, really. And well, let's go back into Rioja and today's episode. I'm really excited because that was also long into making, and I've been hunting our guests for a while to speak about the region that's in some ways is very traditional, classic, but also somewhat hot in the recent changes they have. And I'm really, really appreciating and really enjoyed it. And I will not hold you any further from discovering so many new things like I discovered personally. At least two definitions. One of each is Riojitis and the next one is unblending. And I hope you'll enjoy our little podcast as much as I did. A very, very big welcome to Peter Arijs, the education manager at Rioja DOCa. I'm very excited and happy to have you finally with me speaking about one of my most beloved regions is Rioja. So Peter, can you please introduce yourself, speak a little bit about your background for us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Xenia. I work here at the control board of Rioja for the last 3 years in the marketing department, but more on educational aspects and a few other global projects. I arrived here with a background of wine and education, but actually my professional background is in another industry, so I'm a kind of a lateral entrant into the wine industry in that sense. And my main link to Spain is actually my wife, who's from the north of Spain, from the Basque Country. So that's how I first discovered Rioja more than 20 years ago, actually before I started learning about wine. I liked wine, I didn't know anything about it, and in the north of the Basque Country, they suffer from something called Riojitis, which is a nice disease to have because they only drink Rioja because it's the closest region. So I got exposed to quite a bit of Rioja, but at a quite standard level. But I always was surprised how qualitative these wines were, even if it's your standard Crianza. And then, as I was saying, I was not really educating myself about wine at that point. I'm talking about 20 years ago now. But then, as I went through life and got more interested into wine in general, I started going through WSET courses, eventually took diploma, and then I got more interested. And as we visited Spain more, I got to discover Rioja more, and then I got exposed to all these classic producers, all these reservas, grand reservas, Muriet, Tondonia, Riscal, the classic names. And that was a first discovery, how unique these aged wines were. And then as I kept going back, I discovered that there's even more. So Rioja was like an onion that you could keep peeling. Then I discovered there were other grape varieties. There were smaller producers that were doing different things. So that's a bit how I got introduced to Rioja in general. And then 3 years ago, this opportunity, which is also a long story that I'm not going to tell right now, presented itself. I was already working as a Rioja educator, so I think maybe we'll touch a little bit more on that. You're actually also a Rioja educator. That's how I had a link with the Consejo. And at a certain moment, there was an opportunity in the Consejo to work on this educational project called Rioja Wine Academy. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years, growing this educational platform. And yeah, it's a very exciting region to work for, and I'm glad to be here to talk more about it.
Beautiful. I always love how people working in wine who are passionate about wine always end up in wine for some bizarre reason just because they were curious. That's definitely a good start, and I love the stories where it's always chercher la femme. So you just fall in love with the region, with the woman, and then you're just there for 20 years. But we definitely will touch upon the Rioja Academy because Peter mentioned I am also the educator and I find it one of the most consistent programs. But before we go kind of deeper on Rioja, maybe we will try to place it geographically and climatically. I hope most of you listening to us do know where Rioja is located. But if you're just discovering Spain, its wine region, so let's try to map it within Spain and explain what influences its geography and climate.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think as a brand, Rioja is quite familiar with most people. We've done some market research on this. If we ask them to name a wine region in Spain, Rioja is often their first answer. We are the oldest wine region, 100 years old this year, the largest wine region of Spain. So yes, the name is familiar, but people don't indeed always know the details about location, geography, climate. So Rioja is located in the northern part of Spain, about 100 kilometers south of the Basque coast. There's a mountain chain there, that's the Sierra de Cantabria, that shields the region from the worst of the Atlantic weather. And the region is centered mainly around the Ebro River. So it's basically a valley. There's another mountain chain, which is called Sierra de la Demanda, which is framing the region. And I think Rioja is quite unique because you have basically in Spain three main climates. You have this Atlantic climate that I already talked about in the north, which is cold and wet. You have a continental climate in the center, La Meseta, which is at some altitude, which is very hot, dry in summer, which is cold in winter. And then you have a Mediterranean climate, the whole east coast, that's dry, warm, more moderate, and not that much difference between summer and winter. And in Rioja is in this unique position that the three climates actually converge. So you have still some Atlantic influences through the Ebro River Valley, because the Ebro goes all the way to Catalonia. You get the Mediterranean climate, which is more obvious in Rioja Oriental than other parts in Rioja, which we might also touch upon. And then you have also still some continental influences. So it's a very interesting climate that's actually very well suited for grape growing. In that sense, it's not too warm. You have all the right factors, and there's a variety of exposures. We have altitudes from 300 to 900 meters also. So it's a quite diverse region in that sense. 666,000 hectares. So it's actually a pretty sizable region. If you put that into context, it's Burgundy and Champagne combined. It's larger than some wine countries. It's larger than New Zealand. It's larger than Austria. Pedro Ballesteros, master of wine, he says, and I like this quote a lot, Rioja is not a wine style, it's a wine country, because you have all these differences even within the region, which I'm sure we'll touch more upon today as well.
Yeah, I think in most of the heads of people, Rioja is definitely connected more to its classical, let's say, style and aged red wines and more Tempranillo dominant. But I agree with you that it's not only about the great diversity and variety. And when did I do my educator's course? Oh, it was last year, so it's almost more than a year ago. And we did visit the different subzones, and you can tell the difference, not only climatically and geographically, like you described, the different influences, but also by the topography a lot, by the microclimates that they have a lot, and also by the grapes, to be honest, because I think it's quite, not say logical, but I think it's always maybe historically and traditionally connected that there is more Tempranillo in the zones of Álava and Alta, and more Garnacha in the Oriental, and that influences also the styles that are made. What would you tell is more in terms of trends in the grapes? Because I've seen there have been new varieties, more varieties, international varieties added recently. Is it answering the trends? Is it answering the climate change? Is it answering some winemaking, wine growing techniques? What is it in your opinion?
Yeah, climate change is a big factor. For example, if you talk about grape varieties, Garnacha is a grape variety that you find more in the warmer zones because it's a long cycle variety, so it needs more time to ripen. It resists drought better. It also is well suited, coincidentally, you could say, to the style of a little bit more less tannic wines, more fruit-driven wines. So in that sense, Garnacha is certainly one of those varieties to keep an eye on that's been doing very well. Tempranillo is still the mainstay. It's still the large majority of grape varieties here. It's a more short cycle variety. Temprano means early, so it's earlier ripening, and you indeed find it more in the cooler zones, Rioja Alavesa, Rioja Alta, and it's kind of moderate in all of its aspects, right? Moderate tannin levels, moderate acidity, moderate alcohol, although things are also changing with climate change. So it also adapts well to blending partners like Graciano, which is a little bit more acidic, has more tannins. So for long aging wines, that can be an interesting blending component. Mazuelo we have, which is Carignan in French. So that's also a grape variety that has good acidity, good colors, also a good blending partner. So we have all these components to play with, not only grape varieties, but also altitudes. And that allows us to indeed make both these classic long aging wines, but also do like single variety wines or single plot wines. And that I think is making Rioja very exciting too.
What about the whites? Because as I said, most people probably associate Rioja with the red blends aged in oak. But I've seen more and more whites coming up and more winemakers experimenting with the whites that are making. Do you also feel this trend of trying to discover more white wines in Rioja?
Absolutely, it's a very exciting development in Rioja, and it's always been here, and it went through phases. If you look at the history, there were parts in history where there was a lot more white grapes in Rioja. Also, the way that they were in the past much more used in red wines, and that's actually something that's coming a little bit back. But the whites on their own, Rioja today is the second white wine appellation of Spain. Few people realize that. It's Rueda is number one, but Rioja is the second wine appellation by volume. So it has, I think, in terms of production and commercialization, almost doubled in the last 10 years. And it was really given an impulse by the control board when in 2007, 6 new white grape varieties were approved. So we have now 9 grape varieties to work with. That gave producers a lot more tools. Meanwhile, the market also evolved. I think worldwide today there's more white wine sold than red. So all of these factors have helped. And then the fact that the quality of the white wines here in Rioja is really amazing. We can work with these old Viura vines that can make magnificent wines that are aged well. We have something like Tempranillo Blanco, which is a unique variety of here, which is a color imitation of Tempranillo that's more suited for like fresh and fruity wines, a little bit more aromatic. We can work with Grenache Blanc, Malvasia de Rioja, Maturana Blanca is a super interesting grape variety. So we have all this, again, 9 varieties to work with whites as well. And that's always, I think, the surprise element for people that are not that much into Rioja, right? I think also all these groups that I bring here, every time they say to me like, wow, the whites are really amazing. And I think very gastronomic and always textured whites. That's for me the key of Rioja. In reds, I would say, if I have to summarize red Rioja wines, I think it's fine wines, it's elegant wines, because we are still a fairly northern region, so we're not talking like very tannic, over-extracted, overripe wines, which Spain is sometimes a little bit associated with. But I think Spain is also changing as a whole, and there are super exciting wines all over Spain these days. So in reds, I would say Rioja fine red wines. And in whites, I would say like textured gastronomic whites.
I absolutely adore this diversity, and I agree with you that not a lot of people understand or had it in their mind connected with Rioja that you can actually, for example, as a sommelier, you can have the full dinner paired only with Rioja wines, from sparklings to sweet ones. So you can go through sparkling and then lighter whites to more structured whites to lighter reds, more structured reds, and sweet wines, which we actually tasted with you that I've never tasted before. So that was, I guess, an experience to discover that you have the whole palette of the wines produced in wine region. And not a lot of regions do this all combination, from lighter, sparkling, refreshing to very structured, powerful, maybe concentrated sweet wine. So that's really amazing. So if you are a sommelier or if you're doing any tastings, I think that's a very, for me, a safe choice and easy in the most positive sense, that you can focus on Rioja and present the whole palette and diversity of it. You've mentioned, when we were speaking about the subzones and kind of regional structure, this trend of single vineyards and village wines that I've seen actually with you when we were visiting some producers, that they're doing this, not only viñedos singulares, but also the village wines, which is something new in understanding, again, Rioja terroir, because it was more focused on aging requirements previously. But now I see this as well. You can confirm, or maybe we can debate, this focus on terroir, which as well helps their premium positioning. Do you agree? Do you also see the same kind of focus on more site-specific wines in your experience?
Yes, and I think in a way it's not new that now, having moved to Rioja for the past 3 years, there's really so much diversity in exposition of parcels and soils, and producers have always knew that. And they kind of used that in their, even in their blended wines, which indeed is maybe the tradition of Rioja. And I think now there's a bit of a transition an evolution to unblending, where people are saying, well, we have this great plot. Why don't we use it as why don't we make a specific plot wine of this, or a single grape variety and things like that? And indeed, maybe Rioja is mostly known, at least as a general introduction, and that's also what you learn in wine education, for the aging requirements, right? And they're easy to understand. It's easy to educate people about what Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva is. It basically means how long you age a wine in oak, and then some bottle aging as well for some styles. I'm not going to go into the full details here. And it's very recognizable. It's also a stylistic expression, so people know what to expect when they buy a wine like that. So that's I think it's still going to be relevant, because there's sometimes voices that say, well, this is a little bit outdated and stuff like that. But I think it's still relevant. It gives like a good indication of what to expect. And you're not obliged to use all of this in Rioja. Rioja is a very liberal appellation, I would say. We have made a lot of changes to the regulations, and we are still making them, to allow a lot of different expressions of the wines. And then one of these changes that you're indeed referring to is in 2017, we allowed, besides the zone, also the village or a single vineyard to be mentioned explicitly on the label, and even to have a specific back label for that. So that's another indication to a customer to know, like, starting with the zone, which I think, as you described before, is starting to get a little bit of recognition that a wine from Rioja Oriental is different than a wine from Rioja Alavesa, Rioja Alta. So you can start with that, and then you can go down the pyramid. Or up, depending how you want to look at it. Then is the village level. So there are 144 villages in Rioja. We have not classified those villages. So if your wine is made from a specific village, you can put the village name on it. And you're starting to see it's a little bit of a Darwinist principle, I would say, that some villages are starting to gain more recognition as others because of the quality, because of historically there were more wineries there. And there are some villages that are really starting to get some recognition. And I think that's great for a region, because all great wine regions in the world, they have gained prominence through their villages. I look at Bordeaux. You have Margaux, Saint-Estèphe. At the other side, you have Saint-Emilion. In Burgundy, people always talk about the villages. In Piemonte, people talk about Barolo, Barbaresco. So this village level quality indication is also starting to happen in Rioja, and that's very exciting. And then the single vineyard wines, it's like the top of the pyramid. So there, again, because the best vineyards, they were already somewhat known, but it's a little bit of a political issue to start classifying them after so many years. Since this is not something that the monks have done, like in Burgundy or something like that. So there we've taken a slightly different approach. So we've actually allowed producers to actually suggest what are their best sites. And then they have to present a dossier, and it has to meet some requirements, like the plot has to be at least 35 years old, has to have unique characteristics, the yields need to be lower than normal, and then the wine itself also has to go through a quality tasting. So these are some requirements that we've put into place to make sure that really the best plots also start floating up, or how should I say it, that are recognized and that they can use it. And yes, today there are, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 160 something, I think 164, if I'm not mistaken, plots that have been classified as single vineyard. And I think it's also a good evolution to have those wines. Again, it's also a quality indication for a customer, because these wines have to pass a minimal core, and you get some very interesting wines. You can taste wines from different parts of Rioja. So there are single vineyard wines from all the three different subzones, from different grape varieties. So it's again an indication for a customer. It's something more terroir driven that you can contrast with those classic Rioja styles. Yeah, these are all developments that have happened in the last 10 years in Rioja, which I think are very exciting.
If I understand correct, you can have both. You can have the single vineyard village indication, but you can also have the aging requirements, so they do not cancel each other out. So you can be from a particular village, but then you can also be a Reserva, Gran Reserva, kind of on top of that.
Yes, it's a parallel classification. Yeah, okay. So first of all, you don't have to use any of these classifications. You can just make standard Rioja generic green back label, we call it. Generic sounds a bit bad in English, but it's generico in Spanish. It means like, it's like the catch-all term. So you don't have to, if you make that kind of wine that just says Rioja and no aging classification, you can do whatever you want. You can use whatever aging vessel you want. You can source your grapes from anywhere you want, as long as it's in Rioja. We have very strict traceability rules around that. But then you can use the aging requirements, and or you can use the geographical indications. So they are parallel to each other. There are two classification systems. Sometimes they are combined. At the zonal level, you can see it quite a bit. You can have a Reserva from Rioja Alta because it indicates, well, oak age, and it's from this specific zone. So then you have two indications. But as you get more terroir specific, it's less likely to see them combined, because a single vineyard, oftentimes the idea is to express the site and not so much the aging aspect. So it's very rare to see like a single vineyard Gran Reserva. Technically, it's possible, but they're a little bit opposite concepts in that sense.
Yeah, I've seen, I don't know, maybe it's also a trend, but I have some very curious discussions with winemakers. So you're correct, it's not obligatory to put the aging requirement, and not all of them follow the same aging that. But what we got into maybe some very fun discussions is about the modern and traditional style of Rioja. Because if you speak to, let's say, consumers, the traditional Rioja that they would probably have in mind is the one that has this aging requirement, and this has its very classic indications of Reserva, Gran Reserva on the label. Whereas when you speak with winemakers, they, in their understanding, the traditional Rioja was before the oak, let's say, arrived and was discovered by the or brought by French winemakers to Rioja. And for them, the traditional style of Rioja is the style of Rioja without any oak aging or minimal oak aging. So for them, when you say this is a traditional style, sometimes they feel a bit offended, and they feel that when you speak now is that, oh, Rioja is rediscovering a modern style that is more fruit forward with shorter aging. They say no, but that was the style exactly for Rioja before the oak came and was, let's say, heavily introduced. So it's really curious to see this parallel, let's say, worlds coexisting now, and different traditions being mixed up. And I feel like having this single vineyard and village wine allows even very classical producers to have this more pure expression of the terroir and the fruit that they want to achieve. But still, I feel a lot of them are keeping a more classic, recognizable range when they would put Crianza Reserva and Gran Reserva on the label, because it also guides the consumers in what they're getting in the bottle. And I think it's pretty normal that they coexist, and that's just
Yeah,
interesting to discover.
sometimes
And
they even coexist in the same winery. That they
yeah,
have a
yeah.
classical range and a more terroir driven range, but more often it's more at the producer level. There are producers that indeed are considered more classical. But those producers, like again, Lopez de Heredia, La Rioja Alta, Murrieta, they were considered like innovators and modernists 100 years ago, because they were starting with something oak that nobody has used before. And then this came, of course, because of phylloxera, because of the French influences and so on. So that's a long story, but yes. And now these so-called modern producers that are putting more fruit forward, or even concrete tanks. Concrete tanks have been here for ages. So in that sense, yeah, Rioja is constantly changing, and that's exciting to see. We were the first to actually classify Crianza Reserva, Gran Reserva, and then it was taken on by Spanish law. We were also one of the first to kind of do this terroir classification, I think together with Cava and Bierzo, that have also done similar classifications. But in that sense, I think, as I explained, Rioja, the idea is that it's a big region. There's a lot of diversity. But as a control board, we want to give the tools to kind of make these distinctions and keep evolving with the times. We actually just changed the rules to lower the alcohol levels. To give another example, just to see it, because this is also a trend that people are looking for lighter wines, more fruit-driven wines, and we felt that our initial alcohol levels that you have to have a certain minimum. I think it was 12% for the reds before, or 11.5, but we lowered that, and so if needed, we will adapt the rules.
That's interesting. Certainly to be that flexible to consumer trends and following them and respecting and implementing them quite fast, to be honest. I'm curious about the whole sustainability trend, about organic, regenerative. How is this aspect doing in Rioja? What are the, let's say, efforts or means that are adopted against climate change or any other measures in the vineyards that are focused on sustainability?
Yeah, I think there we're also moving along with the times. You have to adapt both because of climate change, which is one factor, and consumer preferences. There's also more and more consumer looking for wines that meet certain sustainability requirements. So I think it's just natural that as a wine region you move along. I have to be honest that Rio, first of all, it's not something we do control from a control board. So if you want to have certain certifications, those are external bodies that give them. And we are still a little bit behind compared to the rest of Spain. I think Spain today is at 17% organic viticulture. Rioja is just below 10, I think. Depends a bit on the sub-region. I think Rioja Alavesa is at 12. Rioja Alta is at 7, 8. The part in Navarra is also a bit higher. But that also has to do with, well, first of all, because it's an older traditional region, you could say. So maybe it's a bit slower adapting to change in that sense. But I think the main reason is actually the climate. As I was explaining before, we are in a more northern climate. There is more rain this year. Honestly, this year, if you're working organic, you're going to make very little wine. There has been a lot of issues with mildew, with the oidium. Of course, if you're in your vineyard every day treating it, yes. So it's a lot of extra work. It's a lot of extra cost. But yes, the good news is although we are below the average in Spain. I think, for example, Catalonia is at 30% or something. But of course, it's a completely different climate. It's much easier to work organic there. But it's growing fast because I think if I saw the statistics 2-3 years ago, we were below 5%. So it's in that sense, there's a positive evolution. There's more and more people realizing it's needed. The market also values it because if you make organic or biodynamic, you're much better positioned in export markets, certainly towards monopolies. They value that a lot. So yeah, in that sense, I think there's a positive evolution. There's also at the winery level, quite some wineries that are making good efforts that are in the production processes, installation. Today we have 27 wineries that are in the program for sustainable wineries for climate protection. So that's a certification program here in Spain. So I think we're the region with most wineries under that certification program. So yeah, things are moving in that direction. Definitely, we cannot be immune to that. Otherwise, this wouldn't work.
No, yeah, I agree with you that the most important part of it is the trend and not maybe the numbers flat and square, because if the trend is there, it means that the people are caring about it and they're trying to find a way. But also, you mentioned it very correctly, in my opinion, that the climate plays an important part and it allows you to do as much as you can, because then you want to produce wine in the end and you want to produce commercially sustainable volumes of the wine in the end. So if that is not possible within the organic or sustainable or biodynamic, then yes, the winemaker has to have decisions to make about it, and it's totally fine. But I like that you mentioned that the trend is important, that the trend is growing, and obviously in some parts of Spain and some parts of the world, it's easier to be organic when it's drier and sunnier and there is no mildew or less rainfall. That all makes it favorable, but the winemakers understand that they have to adapt. So expecting that 100% of them should be organic by 2025, I think is not realistic if it's not really possible in terms of the conditions. But speaking about the trends, because that was Rioja for me was maybe the first of the bigger wine regions that I got introduced to wine tourism in its full scope. And we just made wine tourism focused episode with a friend of mine who works in tourism, as it has experience of living abroad as well and comparing different countries. And Rioja did really impress me with the diversity of the offer in wine tourism. Do you feel that it's an important part of Rioja's landscape overall? And do you see if it has changed, evolved also in the past couple of years? And what is wine tourism for Rioja now?
I think it's very important. First of all, wine is super important here. When talking about sustainability, just to come back to your previous point, people are always talking or mostly talking about like the environmental aspect of sustainability. But there are other parts of sustainability. There's economic sustainability, social sustainability. And in that respect, wine in general is hugely important for Rioja. This is a region that's centered around wine. 20% of the GDP of the region is wine related. So that's not just wine making, but also the growers cultivating grapes, there's barrel producers, label manufacturers, there's the whole peripheral industry around it as well. And wine tourism is part of this peripheral industry as well, bringing a lot of visitors to the region that are drawn by several things, really, by the wines itself, quality of the wines, by the landscape, which is magnificent. And you've been here, so I think you can confirm it. There are other wine regions that are they're also producing great wines, but they're not always equally beautiful, right? Some are rather flat, or here you have these mountain chains, these valleys. You have these medieval cities, things like La Guardia, the train station district in Aro, which is historic. So you have that cultural aspect as well. Of course, the weather is often nice. Now is a great period, September, we're in harvest. It's a bit like Indian summer. It's still nice weather. So there are a lot of things that draw visitors to here, the gastronomy also. So that makes it a very attractive destination. And we've seen wine tourism grow a lot in the last few years. There are close to 1 million visits to wineries per year. So that's just winery visits. And then if you look a little bit beyond that, there are even more visitors. 214, to be exact, according to our latest counts, wineries are open for wine tourism. There are about 600 wineries in total. So 1 out of 3 of the wineries in Rioja has a wine tourism offering. Sometimes it's modest. It's a family winery that gives you a very private, personalized tour by a family member, which can be very unique and nice as well. But it can also be like an avant-garde architectural winery like Marqués de Riscal, with the hotel by Frank Gehry, Isios designed by Calatrava. So there are very nice wineries to see. I mentioned the Barrio de la Estación, which is historic, and they have really created a very nice offering around that with a lot of experiences. Not just your standard visit to the winery. Of course, it's always impressive to see these barrels. I think we were also together at Campo Viejo, which is another good example of a winery that's doing very well in wine tourism, and just to see the sheer magnitude in all these barrels. But of course, once you've seen barrels, you don't want to see barrels every time. So there's also nice experiences in the vineyards, balloon flights over Rioja. You can go with the bike, and so it's very diverse. I am really surprised by also the creativity of the wineries here, that the offerings they come up with, music festivals in summer in the vineyards. It's really a vibrant region, and I invite everyone to come and discover it.
No, absolutely. I agree with you that this kind of diversity and vibrancy, as you said, you can go to very modern, very architectural driven bodegas, and then you can find very little towns frozen in time, like you mentioned, and it's the diversity of it. And of course, a big part of it is the gastronomy. But for me, what I discovered as well, studying wine tourism in particular, is the proximity and the easiness to reach wine regions can play an important part on top of all the other efforts, of course, that you mentioned, of them keeping it very vibrant and diverse, is the easiness to reach it. And I've traveled to Rioja by multiple means of transport. I've never flown in, but I know that there is an airport in Logroño. I've never been. It's tiny, I assume, but you can obviously travel by car. You can take a train, and I've traveled by train from Bilbao, from Madrid, from Zaragoza, and from Barcelona. You can take a bus from, again, all the cities. And that for me is quite a key important factor, that you can reach the region, because if the region is in the middle of nowhere, and if you don't have a car, how are you supposed to be a wine tourist there? And then what you mentioned as well, inside the cities like in Aro, this Barrio de Estación, you can arrive there and you can walk around. So you don't need to always have a car, which for a lot of people can be sometimes an obstacle if they're not driving already in the region. So I think that was naturally organized because of the train, but also they kept it and it evolved and it can be used now. So it's a big plus on top of all the other offers, is that the region is easy to reach, and that is important. And the other important factor is that they're open. Because we, in some regions, well, I'm based in France, so I can diss a little bit the French ones, because if you go in Bordeaux to the chateaus, previously a lot of the doors of the chateaus were closed, and you can only get there if you have an appointment, if they're expecting you, blah, blah, blah. In Rioja, I feel that they're turning this more into come and go experience, that they are open from morning until the evening. And then if you book the tour, it's great, but you can also just come in for a short tasting, and there still be wine tourism responsible who will do either a full walking tour with you or just a short tasting. But that, again, for wine tourism, let's say focused region, that's an important factor, and I think that they're doing it well, and that's always one of the reasons why the wine tourism can be performing well or not in the region. So I agree with you, that's a lot to explore, and certainly if you haven't been there, I don't know why you haven't been there. It's one of my favorite regions to go, so absolutely advisable to go there. But I finally want to touch
So
the
I just want to, before
yeah.
you switch to the next topic, I think you summarized it very well. And I think accessibility is really the key here, that all these top wineries are open to visit and open for the public, which indeed is not the case in other regions. The Premier Grand Cru Classés in Bordeaux, they're not so easy to get into. But here, wineries that are at that level, that have 100-point wines that are very highly regarded, all of them are open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's best to make an appointment, but indeed, some of them have a tasting room can get into, and I think that's a very important point. And of course, yes, you can come by public transport. Sometimes it's nice to have a car to get to some of these wineries. There are a few good hospitality companies here too that will drive you around, so that you can always take advantage of. And with just one thing I wanted to add is like it's not something, it's not always just Rioja, right? It's the north of Spain. I see a lot of people making like a tour with like they go to the Basque Country as well, they enjoy the gastronomy there. So a lot of our visitors are from US, and they like this northern part of Spain in particular. And of course they spend a good amount of time in Rioja, but we're also in a attractive location in general. So it's not just an isolated wine region. There's also other things around it that you can visit. So agree with you. If you haven't been here, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the topic that I was eager to discuss is obviously the education part of your job, because I've seen Rioja Academy being one of the maybe longest programs on wine education from a region, especially in the situation when the wine business is in a tricky period of its development, when there are tariffs, when there is consumption is not growing, when there is the red consumption is not growing. So there's a lot of uncertainties in the wine world. Why do you think it is important to still focus on education, and why Rioja is investing in it?
I think there's a number of reasons why we invest in it. First of all, I think I consider Rioja as one of the top classic wine regions in the world. And if you look at regions that are similar in this sense, like Bordeaux, like Burgundy, like Barolo, Champagne, they have similar efforts, and it's not for a reason. Of course, it's something that about prestige to do there as well, but it's because they have something to tell about. Champagne is also not an easy region, and I sometimes draw parallels with Champagne and Rioja, because there's like big brands, growers, there's like plants, single variety, blah blah. So okay, long topic. I won't go into this topic, but yes, there is a lot to tell about. It's sometimes a little bit misunderstood, our region, I think. Sometimes it's like pigeonholed to oak aged red wine Tempranillo, but we've already discussed today that there's much more than that. And I think education in general is something that anyone that wants to have a better experience in whatever it is, and in this case it's wine, but also if you go traveling, you do a little bit of research, you educate yourself about where you're going, which are the best hotels. If you're going to eat out, you also want to know. Sometimes it's simply by asking a friend. You don't have to go through a full educational program, but like people that do want to know more, I think we have to give them the tools to do it. As a region, we've decided to make all this education free of charge, because it's what promotes our region as well. I think anyone that has a little bit of interest in wine and Rioja in specific and wants to learn more, they can come to our online portal, riojawineacademy.com, We offer everything from basic introductory courses. We have a course called Rioja Enthusiast. That's just 4 hours scratching like the surface, so that at least you know the styles, you know the varieties, and so on. And then we have our diploma, which is more advanced. Maybe somebody that has a WSET level 2 or 3 will be more drawn to that. And again, online, free of charge, available in different languages, mainly English, Spanish. We've added a few more. We have more than 30,000 online subscriptions already, so that's quite significant. And all the feedback that we get on the courses is hugely positive. We have a net promoter score above 9, so people are really enjoying those materials. And then the next step in that is also not just to bring people to the platform, because the platform, of course, is very nice. You can do it at your own time, again, free of charge. But sometimes you want to have a little bit more of a personal experience, right, with an educator and with a tasting. So for that, we've built a network around the world of today 200 certified educators. These are people that we bring here to learn about this region in more detail and also learn how to teach about it. And they can use all our resources, also the part of the online platform, and they can add classroom sessions to that. Yeah, we were working together with those educators, and they bring the academy to life, let's say, in their classes. And I think it's been working great. It's again, people discover the diversity of Rioja. The point I made before, like putting us at level with these other classic wine regions, I think in general you find a little bit more resources on Bordeaux, on Champagne, on Rioja. It was a little bit lacking, I would say. Even in some well-known wine education materials, the information is sometimes a little bit outdated, which is normal because we've been moving pretty fast as an appellation, as I've been saying, making all these changes. So if you really want the latest up-to-date information that you cannot find anywhere else, we want to offer it free of charge to everyone. And I think it's a very exciting concept. I mean, I've started out through wine education. I've grown an interest into wine, and I see this also with our online program. Even a lot of users that are starting out and they just out of interest start with this Rioja Enthusiast course, and they move on from there. So I think it is helpful. It helps people to discover the diversity. It draws them to a region, and I think it's something we will keep investing in. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as I was also obviously part of the academy, and I enjoyed it a lot, and it helped me a lot in communicate about Rioja to, well, different groups of people, because also what I've noticed when we were at the camp is that the profiles of people you invite are quite diverse. So they are, of course, some educators, they're sommeliers, they're influencers, they're wine writers. There is a good mix, a good bunch of people that are very different at what they do. So for me, it's curious, what do you see? How do you see this role of the basically region brand ambassadors that you create? Because I imagine most of the people who go through your programs, they are in some way your regional brand ambassadors, because they know more, they understand more, they have a personal connections. So when you do this various programs, whether it's online or more in depth as for the educators, how do you see the role of this regional ambassadors then going into their lives, and well, what do you expect them to do?
Yes, you pointed out well that we bring out on different profiles, and this has also evolved, I should say, because I started here 3 years ago, and I saw that initially we were maybe a little bit too much focused on both in terms of the courses, because we started with high end, the introduction level course, and then recently I launched the tasting course where you can order a pack of wine, so that's also super fun. I saw that we maybe were a little bit too much focused on already a professional or an engaged consumer, and also in the education program we were looking for people that were pure educators, which we still do. And we, like I say, it's very useful to have these educators that are already teaching WSET and other courses to be able to add Rioja to their programs. But I also saw the need for other profiles to educate them. People working in the trade, sommeliers, because in the end, they are also educating, or they're also talking to their customers and telling them about Rioja, or if you're working in the trade, you're also educating your staff or your end customer. So I'm always looking for people that already have some kind of educational background, that are interested to learn more, and that can also do something with it. Whether it's actually going out to teach or just be enthusiastic about the region as a sommelier. And I've seen quite a few of them after coming on the program, adding more Rioja on the list. I actually had a person that wrote to me like, since my visit, I've added so many more Rioja to my list, and it's something I'm very enthusiastically consuming about to my customers. So that's also a goal in the end. Education is not like the pure classical classroom education, but there are like other people out there that are educating, even influencers, as you rightly say, people that are doing good quality online content, and we also feel that it's useful to educate them. So anybody listening that's drawn to the program for this year, we've already completed the program, but usually we run it every year. So again, have a look at riojawineacademy.com and you'll find all the information there.
Yeah, I'll leave some of the links to follow the academy so you do not miss this incredible opportunity. And I feel that it is answering obviously this other trend, which is educating and communicating with the consumers, especially maybe the younger generation. So your approach to onboarding the influencers is a good excellent approach, because how younger audience is consuming information, including the information about wines and different wine regions, is online. They were not likely to buy, Janss's Atlas of Wine to study wine regions. No, they follow somebody and then they want to see and kind of feel the stories online. So that's again one of the trends that I feel that Rioja is trying to touch upon, and that's great. But let's try maybe play a little bit in future predictions and future telling, because we've discussed the trends that are in force already now, this adaptation to climate changes, trying to answer and pay attention to the authenticity, to heritage, to touch upon sustainability, and this education, communication with younger audience as well. But what do you feel in the coming, let's say, in the foreseeable future, 5, 10 years, in your personal opinion, what would be the biggest opportunities as well as challenges for Rioja?
That's a tough question. And just to make clear, I'm not the official spokesperson, nor do I communicate about the strategy. So this is going to be a very personal answer. And I'm not even sure how to answer it. I mean, challenges, there are many. Yeah? The wine world is not in an easy place. Consumption is decreasing. There's an economic situation. There is competition from not only other regions, but also other drinks. Younger consumers are a little bit more curious. They don't stick to one kind of region or style. So, in that sense, I think the diversity that we have to offer is a good thing. That they can keep exploring Rioja. What else was I going to say here? I had something in my mind. Yeah, I think we're a classic wine region, and sometimes that can have like an image of being, I don't know, a little bit dated. But I think throughout this podcast, I've already made the point that we are adapting with the time and changing our regulations a lot. But I think the fact that wine is from a specific place and there is a story behind it and a history, that wine has been always made here, that is so important. It's not an industrial product. It's not a fabricated product. Even wine in general, if you compare it to other alcoholic drinks, it doesn't go through distillation. It doesn't go to brewing. It's something that occurred naturally. Romans were drinking it, and even here in Roman times, wine was made. And I think there actually classic wine regions can have an advantage to rediscover and to bring those stories to life. That it's not just like a brand. Of course, we're promoting the Rioja brand in general, but there's something underneath it that I think is sometimes a little bit buried in all this communication about alcohol is bad and health aspects, and it's always been part of the Mediterranean diet. We are in this region, and of course you have to consume in moderation. So I think that's both a challenge and an opportunity that I think that's going to be interesting.
No, for sure. I agree with you, and I think we've already actually touched upon some of the both opportunities and challenges and how Rioja is starting to address or will address, because you've mentioned already this shifts in the products, allowing lower alcohol is already kind of trying to not to lose the audience that is going to lower or zero alcohol wines or other beverage. So we are trying to still catch the
Hmm.
audience that is willing to stay with the wine, but they want their wines to change and adapt a little bit. And for me, the opportunity, I think, for a lot of wine regions is the wine tourism that is now also kind of trying to find its niche, finds the way because it's evolving and it's being more experience driven and more value to the consumer, to the tourist. And that has been really exciting to explore. And I've seen Rioja, as you said, offering very diverse things that you can do in the region. You can have the Segway excursion, you can have just pure gastronomic exploration, you can do whatever you want. There's the balloons, trying to again to hold this interest in a wine region that you come there, but it's not only about the wine. And I think maybe the opportunity for Rioja lays in exploring this wine tourism because it what draws people in and it what brings them back to the wine consumption. What I guess we all are trying to promote working in the wine. But I don't think many of you know that Peter is also a hidden blind tasting champion. That was a surprise for me because we were together at the I don't know how to say it in English, the blind tasting competition in Paris, which is organized by Villa Viniteca every year. And Peter, were you guys second? Did you do the second place?
Yeah, yeah. It was our first
Okay.
participation, and we ended.
On the first participation, nevertheless, that was really humiliating, but I'm very happy for you. But it's quite humiliating for all of us who didn't make it to the final. That these guys made it to the second place on their first attempt, and you guessed one of the aged Riojas, if I'm not mistaken, in your maybe in your that was the final. Yes, that was
Yeah,
a
in the final.
Rioja. Okay, so you need to give us, all of us, sitting wine exams, preparing for wine competitions, and just trying to explore and understand Rioja more. What are your blind tasting hacks for Rioja specifically? How do you identify it for yourself? What should we pay attention to?
It's not easy because when I'm blind tasting with people here, often it's like the first question that we ask ourselves: could it be Rioja or not? Because the chance that somebody from here brings a Rioja bottle is quite high. So it's kind of, I guess, if you're in some other part of the world blind tasting and somebody presents you a wine, you have like all the option open. But here, like the first decision point is already: is it Rioja or not Rioja? Right? And that's already a difficult question in some cases. There's obviously wines, if you get a Pinot Noir, uh, probably you're not going to say it's Rioja, but like, yes, Rioja, as I rightly explained, different styles, grape varieties, and so on. But if you get to classic Rioja, and sticking to red for a moment, I think, yes, oak is of course oftentimes present. American oak is not always as typical as some people think it is, but if you recognize American oak, which is like these classical coconut dill aromas, the chance is quite high that it's Rioja. There are some other regions in US it's used a bit, in Australia it's used a bit, so it's not exclusively tied to that. If it's French oak, it's maybe a little bit difficult. But aging wines are in blind tasting competition. You typically get something fairly classical, as if it's a Rioja, I should say. So you obviously have the oak, and then the textural aspect. I think is, like I was saying before, it's often Tempranillo, which is more medium in everything. So it doesn't have quite the tannins of a Bordeaux that you could confuse it with the oak. Doesn't have quite the acidity of the Italian wines. You might recognize the Graziano. I was at Mundus Vini the last week, and I had a few flights of they were Tempranillo or Tempranillo based blends, and you oftentimes recognize when there's a bit of Graziano in it because it adds this very spicy element, which can work very well in a blend. Graziano as a monovarietal is a little bit more tricky, I think, but also quite well recognizable, but not always as easy to get right in terms of wine. But yes, what else can I say? In that specific example, it was wine from, if I'm not mistaken, from the 60s. So I hadn't actually guessed it that old. I was like somewhere 80s or something. But yes, if it's really like, it was already like amber color, not all that intense. Of course, old wines, they tend to converge to each other, right? Sometimes it's also just a little bit of a personal feeling. And not everything is just easily transferable in terms of blind tasting. Sometimes this wine just brings you to a place, and in my case, it was this is Rioja. There were people afterwards talking that were like on an old Bordeaux or an old Rhone wine. Yeah, for me in that case, I was quite clear. It's like classic style. The oak was quite a bit of American oak in that case. But yeah, when it's so old that all starts to. But there was like this elegance. I'm always saying it, Rioja wines are fine wines. Also in a lot of cases, indestructible wines because I guess this wine not as old as it was. And it's amazing that how these Gran Reservas, which are already aged for quite a bit, minimum 5 years. So they're kind of the story is that they're released when they're ready to drink, but then they still have a lot of potential.
Then you drink them 40 years later, they're still in shape.
They're still amazing. It's this is something that makes Rioja in this classic style. And that's another reason why I think they won't disappear. Is this is unique? This is not replaceable. There are. And this is, I think, also just going back to your previous question, make something unique, make something that's not replaceable, make something that, although we have this diversity and we allow a lot within boundaries because it has to meet, obviously, the grapes have to come from here, it has to meet certain quality levels. There still has to be some uniqueness to it, right? And in Rioja Tempranillo from Rioja Alavesa, I think is quite unique. It has this more grippy profile from the limestone soils. Garnacha from Rioja Oriental is quite unique, I think. The classic aged blends from Rioja Alta, they are quite unique. So I think you still have to have this kind of unique offering. And there was some discussion, I remember a few months ago when all these tariffs were being discussed and a lot of regions were like this. And I remember our general director made a statement like, well, Rioja is irreplaceable. It's a bit maybe exaggerated in a way. But I think, yes, in a certain way, there's certain wines here that you just don't find anywhere else. And I think, yeah, and also in blind tasting, I oftentimes get them.
Yeah, I think it is very closely connected with the tasting experience. So one of the best advices for blind tasting I have received from Master of Wine is just to taste more. And that was really straightforward. So if you want to get Rioja, taste more Rioja, you'll get it. But
yeah, there are two things. Well, if you want to talk more general, not just about Rioja, but in blind tasting, you have to have your theory right. So you have to that's if you don't have the theory, you'll never be a good blind taster because you have to know all the characteristics of all the grape varieties of the regions, why this has more acidity than that, why this has more tannins than that. So you have to have and if you recognize a grape variety, you have to know in which regions it's grown, so you can compare. So the theory is essential, and then taste a lot, but also important, taste with other people and taste with people that know more than you about certain subjects. I'm not a big expert on Italy, but I've tasted with people that know a lot about Italy, and then you start learning a lot. So in terms of general blind tasting, these are my main tips. Yes.
Some other tips that I want to get from you as an insider, because you are our insider in Rioja, is your favorite hidden gems. It can be a winery, a style, or a grape that you would absolutely advise somebody to try from Rioja.
Oh, I cannot mention any wineries because, first of all, I have too many favorites to mention, and second of all, working for the control boards it puts me a little bit in a difficult position to kind of put one winery forward. Okay, let's say styles. I think like in terms of styles, something that everybody should try to try is like Gran Reserva whites. This is also a unique and irreplaceable style that no other region produces, and it's fantastic. So I remember we did a tasting a few months ago. That was also with Pedro Ballesteros. By the way, we did an overview tasting of Rioja, and there were quite a few Gran Reservas in there. It's not like just one or two producers making it. There's quite some good examples now, and they are fantastic wines. So Gran Reserva white, look if you can find them. I haven't tasted a bad one yet as of today. Grape varieties. Let's place a bet on Maturana Blanca. I really like Maturana Blanca. It's actually the oldest grape variety that's documented in Rioja, but it was only let's say reapproved in 2017, and it's a crossing between Savagnin or Traminer, you find in more northern regions, Jura and so on, and Castellano Blanca, which is actually an old Spanish variety that's also the parent of Godello, Verdejo. So you see, I'm moving in a direction of more freshness there, right? With all the grape varieties that I've mentioned. So it is a grape variety that's very nice, has very nice acidity, a nice linear profile, and yeah, all the Maturana Blanca that I've tasted so far, they're very, very promising, and I think we're going to hear more from that little grape as well. It is a little grape, also, literally speaking. It's quite tiny. So, but that also gives it good flavor concentration.
I find it's very scandalous that you are recommending white wines from the red wine region, but it again shows how much Rioja is changing and how much the perspective and perception of it is changing. And yeah, I agree with you that the whites from Rioja can absolutely surprise a lot of people who are not thinking about it in this sense. I mean, there is a lot to discover, absolutely. So
let's be even more scandalous and say rosé, clarete. Clarete is also something very unique from Rioja.
true.
It's this co-fermentation of red and white grapes, specifically from the Alto Najaria Valley. You have a town, Cordovin, which does it very well, and a few towns around. But that's also in a time where everything's moving towards standardized, ultra pale rosés that you don't even know if they're rosé or white. To have like a more serious rosé, clarete from Rioja, that's also something that I would recommend.
I was absolutely going to say that because for me they're the gastronomic rosés, the rosés that you can have with a full meal and they would be absolutely beautiful but still fresh and very expressive. I love the styles. Well, I think we have covered so much already about Rioja, so unless you have something to add, I think that has been an absolute blast and we've covered definitely a lot of hot and upcoming topics about Rioja. And I thank you very much for spending this time with us and educating us a little bit on Rioja.
It's my pleasure, absolutely. I don't have anything to add other than keep educating yourself, discover Rioja Wine Academy online, or just taste a lot of Riojas, or both at the same time. Can work perfectly.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I really loved talking to Peter and discovering a lot of new things and some insights. And I'm really, really grateful to him for his blind tasting tips. I really enjoyed this part. And well, all of us who are going through wine exams and competitions and certifications, that were some really, really top-notch advice he gave out. And one thing that I'm for sure gonna steal from him is this concept of Rioja being an onion and that you can unpeel it layer by layer. I really love the comparison. I will definitely use it in my wine writing somewhere along the way. And if you're as passionate as nerdy as I am, I do invite you to explore Rioja Academy. It is online mostly. You can also do visits, as Peter said, and it's an absolutely brilliant tool. I love how diverse it is. There are maps, there are videos, there's a lot of text, and well, yeah, it's just neatly organized, which I enjoy a lot. And I also do hope that you are now on the hunt for some white Gran Reserva from Rioja or a Maturana Blanca, which I have heard is a more rare find. But I am myself extremely eager to explore and to find these bottles. And obviously, please, if you like this episode, like, share, subscribe, and share the love of wine. Bye!